The year was 1824, and the United States was on the brink of a political storm. The country had seen its fair share of fierce presidential battles, but nothing could have prepared the people for what was about to unfold. This was an election that would challenge democracy itself, setting a precedent for controversial results in American history. The four main candidates vying for the presidency were John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, William H. Crawford, and Henry Clay. Each man represented a different vision for the nation, but it was Jackson who emerged as the clear favorite among the public. A war hero from the Battle of New Orleans, Jackson had won the hearts of the common people, who saw him as a symbol of strength and perseverance. When the votes were counted, Jackson led the popular vote and secured the most electoral votes, but he did not have the majority required to claim victory outright. According to the 12th Amendment of the Constitution, if no candidate received a majority of electoral votes, the decision would fall to the House of Representatives. This placed the fate of the presidency in the hands of the political elite rather than the American people. What followed was a behind-the-scenes struggle that would later be known as the corrupt bargain. Henry Clay, who had come in fourth place and was thus eliminated from contention, held significant influence as Speaker of the House. Despite Jackson's popularity, Clay detested him and saw him as unfit for the presidency. Instead, Clay threw his support behind Adams, persuading key House members to do the same. In February 1825, John Quincy Adams was declared the next president of the United States. The aftermath was immediate and explosive. Jackson and his supporters were outraged, believing the election had been stolen from the people. Their suspicions only grew when Adams appointed Clay as his Secretary of State, traditionally a stepping stone to the presidency. To Jackson and his followers, this was proof of a corrupt deal made in secret. As Adams took office, his presidency was overshadowed by the growing resentment among Jackson's supporters. The stage was set for a fierce political battle, one that would change the landscape of American democracy forever. John Quincy Adams' presidency was off to a rocky start. From the moment he took office, he faced relentless opposition from Andrew Jackson and his supporters. Determined to expose what they saw as corruption, Jackson's allies worked tirelessly to undermine Adams at every turn. Their goal was simple: to ensure that Jackson would rise to power in the next election and restore the people's voice in government. Jackson and his followers began laying the groundwork for a new political movement. In 1828, they officially formed the Democratic Party, marking the beginning of the two-party system in American politics. Unlike previous parties, the Democrats positioned themselves as the champions of the common man, rallying farmers, laborers, and frontier settlers who felt neglected by the political elite. Meanwhile, Adams struggled to implement his policies. His ambitious plans for internal improvements, such as building roads and canals, were met with resistance from a Congress largely influenced by Jackson's allies. The growing division between the two factions created a tense political climate, one that would ultimately shape the outcome of the next election. As the 1828 election approached, Jackson's campaign was fueled by a sense of betrayal and righteous indignation. He and his supporters launched one of the most aggressive and personal political campaigns in U.S. history. They accused Adams of corruption, elitism, and even immoral behavior. In response, Adams' supporters attacked Jackson's character, bringing up his past duels and questioning his fitness for office. Despite the heated rhetoric, the election of 1828 was a landslide victory for Jackson. His overwhelming support from the working-class voters sent a clear message. The people demanded change. On March 4, 1829, Andrew Jackson was inaugurated as the 7th President of the United States. The moment marked a turning point in American democracy, as power shifted away from the established elite and toward a broader electorate. Jackson's victory was more than just a personal triumph. It was the beginning of an era that would reshape the nation's political landscape. But his presidency would not be without controversy, as his leadership style and policies would spark intense debate and division. Andrew Jackson's presidency began with a promise to give power back to the people, but his tenure was marked by controversy, conflict, and sweeping changes. His leadership style, often described as authoritative and populist, earned him both devoted followers and fierce critics. One of the most significant and contentious events of his presidency was the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Jackson viewed Native American tribes as obstacles to expansion and pushed for their forced relocation west of the Mississippi River. Despite opposition from some in Congress and a ruling by the Supreme Court in Worcester versus Georgia that favored Native American land rights, Jackson ignored the decision. This led to the tragic Trail of Tears, during which thousands of Native Americans perished on their forced journey westward. Another defining moment of Jackson's presidency was his battle against the Second Bank of the United States. Believing it gave undue power to the wealthy elite, Jackson vetoed its recharter and worked to dismantle it, redistributing federal funds to state banks. This move led to economic instability, but it solidified Jackson's image as a champion of the common people fighting against entrenched interests. Jackson also faced a major crisis in the form of the Nullification Crisis of 1832. South Carolina, led by his own Vice President, John C. Calhoun, declared that they had the right to nullify federal tariffs they deemed unconstitutional. Jackson responded with firm opposition, threatening military action if the state did not comply. Eventually, a compromise was reached, but the event foreshadowed the growing tensions that would eventually lead to the Civil War.